Right, yeah, this is another one of Mariah's requests. I actually haven't seen this. This man is my hero, though. Of anyone living today, this man is my hero. He is a legend, John Wedger. However, he hasn't been knighted. I don't think he'd accept it. But anyway, yeah, he's well, as it says, police whistleblower about yeah, child abuse in the UK. But I actually haven't seen this is his testimony. Um, but yeah, I've seen like damn near everything John Wedger said, but I haven't actually seen this. So yeah, let's go.
John Wedger is a police whistleblower. As a CID officer, he discovered back coverings on child sex trafficking networks, which led to an investigative inquiry by the Independent Police Complaints Commission, delving into the depth of police involvement. He is one of the bravest men in the country today, by many people's reckoning. John Wedger, thank you for joining us. Please speak freely to this commission.
I'm recently retired from the Metropolitan Police, where I served as a detective. I specialised in child abuse investigations, and what is relevant to me being here today was my service whilst on the Specialist Vice Unit. I had been asked to look into an allegation made by a 14-year-old girl that she is being used as a prostitute. On looking into it, it appeared that this girl was one of many. She gave me another girl, who in turn gave me another, and it just spiraled. Very, very quickly, we had dozens of young kids aging from 9 to 14 years old. All of them were subject to care orders, either looked after or, in placements, homes or whatever, but all known to the social services. A lot of them were known to the police for being missing persons and everything else. And all of them were addicted to crack cocaine and heroin, and were all being pimped out, as the term goes, by one person, which was a female prostitute who was very well known to the Met Police. And this woman had alleged connections with high-ranked officers and also a local magistrate and someone that was high up in executive status in the BBC. This woman seemed to work with impunity for many, many years, and when looking into it, this actual racket had been going on for a long, long time. What I did was I exposed my findings. I committed them to paper in what was just a basic intelligence report, and I took it to a senior officer. And what I must say, that this isn't the first time that I'd been shut down for exposing child abuse offences. A couple of years prior to that, if I may jump the timeline, I was on an inquiry looking into transient paedophiles that had failed to register, and I found out that they were residing on canal boats within the inland waterway network of the UK. They had information from within the prison service that there were two paedophiles that were living on boats. Now, boats had a lot of poignancy in as much as there was freedom to travel. The canal network was very, very old and therefore didn't get policed, and children like boats. And the BBC had a programme at the time which sort of, it was to do with two little dolls that lived on a canal boat called Rosie and Jim, and it was tied in at the same time as I was looking into this, so kids were drawn to the waterways. I'll get back to the main story, but the reason for telling this bit was that I was told that there were two sex offenders. I was asked to look into it as a field intelligence officer, and if I found another two within a set period of time, they'd be happy. Within that period of time, I'd found 90. I came into work and I was told by a high-ranked officer that the inquiry had been shut down, and the reason given was that they couldn't afford the funding for me. But I had been approached by a Scotland Yard detective who told me, he said, when you investigate any crime and you do well at it, you get praised. When you look into child abuse cases, the opposite happens. Be very careful. He then told me about a cabinet minister that they'd investigated on a few occasions, and on each occasion they'd been shut down. So I was aware that this had gone on. When I questioned the senior officer about, you know, the real reason, he told me, John, I'm so sorry it's come from high up. There's nothing I can do, and promised me any job I wanted. So I moved on to the vice unit. So I was expecting to be praised for what I found out. Each day a new child would be found, and it was just spiralling. I was brought before someone who is now a very, very high-ranked officer in the UK indeed. And he sat me down and he said, John, I've got to be very upfront with you. And I said, well, I'd like to be upfront with you, Governor, as well. And he said, you know, you're, out of all the officers I've got here, there was about, I don't know, 40 officers. He said, you're the second best one I've got, which was a good accolade. He said, but unfortunately, you've dug too deep. What the hell have you done? Now, on a personal level, since the beginning of 2000, I'd brought up 4 children on my own, and this was common knowledge within my unit. And he said to me, if you ever disclose what you found out, you will lose your home, your children, and your job. You must shut the F up. And he said, you will be thrown to the wolves. You have no idea who and what you are dealing with. He said, I'm warning you now, you must back away. And then he said,
and this is what I was saying, a couple of things. This is why the grooming gangs coming out is good. It's good that is now being actually said a lot, and that it's an accepted thing that there are Muslim grooming gangs. However, we have a serious problem with this that is higher up, and I can't help but think, look, I don't think Islam is suitable to the West. That's a whole different conversation. That's a whole different thing. But I can't help but think the Muslim grooming gang cover up scandal that's coming out now is being used as kind of giving the public something that isn't them, basically, because of the Epstein things. And this is why I'm saying, when people are on Trump and the FBI and these people, to release the Epstein files and release, you hear this from a man who was the second best detective. He's out of his own mouth, which is a very honest thing to say. He didn't say he was the best; he said he's the second best. But yeah, you heard out of his mouth that he was threatened. It's This is a very dangerous world that you're stepping into when you start getting into this abuse world. It is more powerful than anything, and I think because of the shame involved in it. So there's a real, for the people that are involved. There's not that it's a shame, but it's because they obviously don't think it's a shame because they do it, but that people will, if people find out, that'll be the end of it. Them, like, there's no coming back from that. So I think that's where they get it. But you see where John Wedger says he probably come to say it. He says the parable of the man down the well in the Bible. You know, there's a man down the well, another man comes along, jumps down the well to get him out. And he's like a rich man. He's like, well, you could have done anything. You could have got a rope. You could have bought a ladder. Now you're just stuck in the well with me. And kind of the parable is, don't be the guy in the well. Don't jump in the well and to save the person, because you'll be just stuck in the well too. Yeah.
something quite strange. And he said that if you say a word of this, and even if you make a complaint, it will come back to me and it will go in the bin. I and no one else will ever betray fellow rank. Shut your mouth. So I walked away from that investigation, and I moved on. I was offered to stay, but I couldn't. What was very strange was that the main witness, the young girl that came forward, was found dead in the street very shortly afterwards on a suspicious drug overdose, which sort of compounded matters. I then moved on to work on child abuse investigations, which is slightly different to vice, and I can, if I have the time, explain why there is this compartmentalisation within these institutions. And it's all down to remits and justifiable reasons for actually doing nothing as opposed to doing something. I went on to a child abuse unit in one of the poorer boroughs of London, and I was asked if I would like, as well as an investigator, take on a second role dealing with various sort of issues they have. and I was told you'll get a day here and there to go to a meeting. And I asked to look into if anyone was dealing with children's homes. I was told no, there was an officer that was dealing with children's homes, but she left 2 years ago, and she didn't do anything anyway because nothing happens. There's no problem. And I asked this sergeant, are there any problems with child prostitution within the kids' homes? And she said, what you on about? No, of course not. I got a list, and this is almost real time as I'm telling it now. I got a list faxed through to me from social services with all the children's homes. There was 26 kids' homes. I picked up the phone and I spoke to the fella and I asked him how many kids they have. And on an average, there's about 5 children reside in these children's homes. And I said, no, I'm not pointing the finger. No one's in any trouble. How many of these children do you lose at the weekend? Which is the usual pattern of missing, you know, when kids go missing. And so out of the 5, we lose 3. And I said, no, honestly, what happens to them? They went, oh, they're being pimped out. So I'd found this officer that had dealt with it for years had found none. Within this, honestly, this was the time as we're speaking now, within this period of minutes, I'd found 3. By the end of that day, I'd found 6. By the end of 3 days to 5 days, I'd found 50. I held a meeting with all the concerned agencies, which involved charities, which involved NGOs, which involved social services, and I highlighted the problem. And I was then harangued, really. I was attacked verbally by head of children's services for this borough, saying to me, what the effing hell have you done? And I said, well, you knew about these kids. I said, yeah, but they hadn't come notice, so we're not worried. The children were making money, so therefore the children weren't worried. The children had a boyfriend, which was their pimp. Therefore, they thought this was love. And the children were also using drugs, so therefore they want to continue to use drugs. So they weren't coming to notice, so therefore social services had written them off, despite the fact that the children's homes would constantly be getting in the logs that they were being picked up and they were going missing. These were regular missing persons. The police have a missing persons unit. They say so many thousands of kids go missing every year. They do, but a lot of them do return. But what is never looked into is what happens when they're going missing. They are working as prostitutes. And again, the child abuse units won't look into them because they say it's not interfamilial, because it's someone else pimping them out. The bigger cities have vice units. Vice units will not deal with them because they say that these are kids subject to care orders. So no one looks into it, and it goes on and it festers and it festers. And then funny enough, after this meeting, I was shut down and moved again. I then came forward a couple of years later. I was actually genuinely concerned that I would lose my children. I know how powerful the police are, and I know what they're capable of, having worked with them. I blew the whistle a few years ago, and I was told that my allegations would be taken at the highest level. I asked to speak to a high-ranked female detective, and this was questioned. And then they did get me a high-ranked female detective, and she said to me, why are you talking to me and no one else? I said, because you cannot roll up your trouser leg. And she said, I understand exactly what you mean. They instigated allegations of corruption against high...
What he's saying there is Freemasonry. Women can't be Freemasons, and that this goes into the Freemasons. But this as well, with the Freemason side of thing, there's a prison guards that talk about it. Prison guards are infiltrated by Freemasons. The police is infiltrated by Freemasons. One police guard said, we had one guy who he was caught bang to rights. I can't remember what he says is what he was caught bang to rights doing. He said, and he was saying, I'm going to walk free. And he said, and everyone thought, no, you've not got a chance. He said, and he went into court and he done this, like this hand sign, I'm sure it's like that. And the judge let him go. And it's a Freemason hand sign. So when he says you can't roll up your trouser leg, is women. That's why he chose a woman, because she can't be a Freemason. She's, yeah.
Ranked officers. When you investigate these crimes as a witness and informant, as I was, you're meant to get regular updates every 28 days. I never received one in 3 years. The matter was passed from one unit to another unit. It ended up with the IPCC, who again did nothing and failed to update me despite the fact that they had corroborating evidence. I met with other police whistleblowers via a few concerned MPs. One of them was a lady called Maggie Oliver, who had exposed the scandal in Rochdale. Another one was a man called Lenny Harper, who had exposed the horrendous goings on at a kids' home called Hope de la Garenne in Jersey. Each one of them echoed each other. They both said they're going to come for you and they will come hard. And I said, what do I expect? They said, right, you will be served with gross misconduct papers. You will be interviewed, they will find against you, you will be sacked, and you will probably face a court case and may go to jail. Now, the threats that was echoed to me, you'll lose your home.
For doing his job, basically. That's what he's in trouble for. Crazy.
Your job, your children. At the same time, the police stopped paying me. I went without wages for nearly 3 years. I had 3 children at home. 4 children, sorry. Then what happened was that they served me gross misconduct papers. And I was told what it will be for data protection violations, which seems to be a common occurrence. I got served with numerous data protection violations. Each one could have given me a 2-year prison sentence. And this continued and continued. Now, what also happened during this period was that one of my children was involved in a life-changing and catastrophic accident in which he was initially declared dead. They revived him. He was on life support for many, many months. I got a call from the hospital to attend the hospital where they had actually lost him. He'd been dead for 10 minutes. So I was called down to the hospital to basically identify him. I turned up and they had actually revived him within this period, but they deemed him as brain dead, although he was on full 100% life support. A colleague of mine was so concerned as I had no money, and for 3 days I slept in my car and stayed by my son's side. My son actually made signs of life and I was able to return home. But my colleague had brought this to the attention of senior officers, just saying, you know, you've got to help this man. He's actually done nothing wrong. The Met Police's response to this, when I got home, they'd sent 2 child protection officers round to interview my youngest boy on allegations that I left him home alone while I was with my dying son. So the threats of you will lose your home, your job and your children rang true. I persisted. I refused to give up. And I set up a forum, a working group with all the police whistleblowers, and it extended and it branched out. The IPCC stopped investigating the crime. I was meant to be given a full breakdown of what went on, and I was given a 1-paragraph letter and told not to contact them again. We're not investigating it. Their answer was that the 3 high-ranked officers that I'd accused of corruption, they went and spoke to them and they denied it, and that was the extent of their investigation. And all them years as an investigator, I've been doing it wrong. We've just got to ask someone if they've done it, and if they say no, that's it. And that was what they expected me to swallow, and told me not to contact them again. I took the matter to the policing minister at the time, a member of the Privy Council and a member of the government's cabinet. He met with me and he was actually, to my surprise, appalled. He arranged for a meeting with the Home Office. The Home Office then got their independent investigation team involved and stated that there will be an independent investigation into my claims. And they deemed that the Met Police and the IPCC had failed and they will look into it. I was summoned to a meeting and it was a fully recorded meeting and it was witnessed, and in which the Cabinet Minister handed my paperwork over to the Home Office officials, and that was an official handover of the paperwork which I supplied to him. They then gave me their assurances that they will be in touch with me and gave me a 24-hour contact number and said they will investigate this independently. I never heard from them again. They have since denied receiving any paperwork. When pushed, they admitted they did receive it, but have now lost it. We are seeing police failings in respect to child prostitution hemorrhaging in this country, but we are seeing them on a provincial level. We're seeing them in Rochdale, Blackpool, Rotherham. We're seeing them in Oxford, Aylesbury, Swindon, all on a provincial level. London is one of the largest urban conurbations in the Western world. It has got one of the biggest police forces. We haven't heard one thing about organised child prostitution in London, and the reason being is that those high up have been covering it up, and this goes right to the heart. I was met with...
It also shows you why the Muslim grooming gangs have got away with it so long, because the people in our higher up like it. They agree with them. They agree with them on what they're doing. It also explains why you can get 3 years in our country, 3 to 5 years for abusing a child, and you can get 15 years for selling drugs. It's like, you see why? Because if worst case scenario, someone in our elite does get caught, banged to rights, and there is no way around it, they're only going to get 3 years on good behaviour, and they're going to go into the protected part of the prison with all their paedophile pals. It's disgusting.
As I said, Lenny Harper. Children were killed at Haute de la Garenne, in which Lenny Harper had forensic evidence, which was then went missing. And he said to me, be careful, what you're looking at will go right to the heart of the establishment. I sat down with the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Cressida Dick, and I explained to her what was going on. And I explained the dynamics of how you groom a child. I said, I can take a child out of the care system. I can groom that child. I can have sex with that child. I can get my friends to have sex with that child. I can pimp that child out. You have not appointed one officer to investigate that. Yet if I leant over my fence and called my neighbour a derogatory term, I'd lose my home, my job, I'd be signing on a register, and I'd never work for the Met Police again. How is that justifiable? How is it justifiable? I now work with victims and survivors of abuse. I help out.
Bear in mind, we live in a country now where you can watch the video. Someone getting arrested for saying, "I love bacon." There's a video of a Jewish guy who happens to be walking past the pro-Palestine thing, and the police actually stop the Jewish guy and say, "You need to leave this area. You're upsetting the Muslims because you're too outwardly Jewish." But you can't be Jewish. You can't be outwardly Jewish around Muslims. You can't say you love bacon because that upsets Muslims. But you can groom a child and pimp them out and make money off of them. And
with recovering alcoholics and drug addicts, I'm working in collusion now with one of the most notorious gangsters the UK had, and the convicted murderer, Chris Lambriano. And I've never had such support and compassion from these people, yet the police would have had me swinging from a rope if they've had their own way. When we look at our...
That's another thing that he says, I've heard John Wedger say. He said, isn't it funny that when I come out with this, the people that supported me was criminals? Was the old gangsters and a lot of these people that have kind of changed their lives around. He's like, we have a country where the criminals care more about the children than the police do. No police stood by him, other than like a couple, like he said, Maggie Oliver, but she was going through her own situation like he was, but hers is more specifically the Muslim grooming gangs. John Wedger's is child abuse as a whole. And specifically more as well in terms of the care homes and politicians and that side of things. Maggie Oliver, yeah, she's a bit more just the grooming gang side of things. But that was it's kind of both of them as well. If you look into their stories, that's where they were. Like, both of their causes is a result of what they found where they was working, kind of thing.
service. We look at our prison system. 75% of inmates are illiterate. This is in the UK. They're illiterate. 75% of our inmates have come from abused backgrounds. We have a recidivism rate of 75%. The system does not work. Child abuse is at the root of all of this. Child abuse units, when I was on them, I've worked on many specialist units in the police. I've worked on units that have been anti-government. I've worked on units that have been financial crime. You get given a car. You get given an expense account. You get given unlimited overtime. When I was on child abuse, we had a car between 10 of us. I worked with 3 alcoholics because the work was so horrendous and impactful. We had no respite. We were worked till we were dropping, and we would have appointments to see psychiatrists every 6 months, but they weren't to sign us off. They were to keep us going, to say, "Oh, you're all right. You're all right. Keep going. Keep going." They deliberately underfund anything to do with child abuse, deliberately, and it's done for a reason. I had many informants that came from the street. They were beggars. They were drug addicts. They had all been sexually abused as children. One of them told me of a scenario when he was in a kids' home at the age of 4, was raped on his first night by a Catholic priest. He then went on to be raped daily and whipped and beaten. He became a drug addict, and he ended up as a rent boy on the street at an area of the West End where I used to work as a vice copper. And that was what was classed as the meat rack in Piccadilly Circus, where young boys were openly picked up for the purpose of prostitution. It was known about. He went to get in a car, and he was in trouble. He needed drugs, so he needed the money. And he had a...
Yeah, we'll pause it there. I think he's talking about Mike Torrega there, the meat rack boy. That's his book, Mike Torrega's book. But what he was saying with the criminal thing as well, it doesn't, because he's right. If you listen to the gangsters, I'll give you one, Paul Tiernan. Go and watch Paul Tiernan on James English. Paul Tiernan was right-hand man to the Adams family, which at one point was probably the most powerful criminal family in our country. The Adamses, at one point. He was right-hand man to one of the brothers. Staunch as you like solid bloke, Paul Tiernan. Like, you can just see it in him. Honest. I mean, he's a criminal, but still, yeah. But he does his first James English thing, tells his life story, blah blah blah, then goes on it again, and then comes out and reveals the fact that something he didn't say in the first one was that he was abused as a child. And he said it's took me till 61 to even tell anybody. He had not told anyone since it happened. He said it happened when he was 7. But this is not, again, it doesn't have to be all linked into the elite. This was just a guy that lived on the estate that did it to Paul Tiernan. And this is John Wedger's thing. He doesn't hyper focus on the Muslim grooming gangs because he says, yeah, there's a problem, but it's one part of the problem when the problem is much bigger. And John Wedger says it is a true fact that 80% of child abuse happens in the home, happens by someone close to the child. A father or uncle or stepdad. Stepdad it typically is, statistically. Yeah. But he's so right with the whole criminal thing. If it goes back to some type of child abuse, whether it's sexual abuse or being beaten. A lot of the early criminals in our country, it was the being beaten, and some being abused, like sexually abused, but a lot of it was just going to the short sharp shock is what they used to call it for young people. They'd throw them in these horrendous military style prisons, and it was meant to knock sense into you. Really, what it done was hardened them. There's one gangster that says, he's like, I got beaten up. He went in there when he was like 15. I think he was younger, actually. I think he was 13, 14. and he got thrown in there, and he said I got beaten the life out of by 10 grown men. He's like, because I was scared of being in this place around criminals, around these like tough lads. He said, and then I got beaten up on my first day by the 10 screws. And yeah, he's like, after that, I thought, wow, I can take a beating from 10 men at like 13, 14. He's like, now I'm not scared of anybody my age. I'm not scared of anybody in this place. I just got beaten. And he's like, they beat me. He's like, I didn't go unconscious. And I remember sitting on the bed and laughing and thinking, wow, I can take it. And he's like, after that, I was unstoppable. And yeah, pretty much all of our criminals, it goes back to some type of child abuse, whether physically, sexually, whatever. It's so right. Crazy Steve, another one. Loads, to be honest. There's loads. But yeah, we'll finish this off tomorrow. Jon Wedger is the man, though. And this has been great because this has been straightforward. I recommend going and looking at more different like podcasts where they actually ask, like, he goes deeper into different stories. And yeah, the man is a wealth of knowledge of this particular subject. But yeah, that's part one. Sweet.